The BRICS nations are moving towards a new common currency to challenge the US dollar. And we know the de-dollarization cry is getting louder and louder, with Brazil being the latest country looking to break free. Brazil's President Lula is urging the BRICS nation to end the dollar dominance, asking the bloc to develop their own currency. And he made a striking statement that tells us how this new challenge to the dollar could start. And he said, "Why can't a bank like that of the BRICS have a currency to finance trade relations between Brazil, China, and other countries?" And we get even more clues from Russia's State Duma chairman Alexander Babakov about the composition of the new BRICS currency. Its composition should be based on inducting new monetary ties established on a strategy that does not defend the US dollar or euro, mentioning how the currency could be backed by gold and other commodities such as rare earth elements. Now, if this currency is backed by gold, it will be the greatest challenge the US dollar has ever faced. It will be stronger than the yuan, the yen, or the euro combined, because the new currency will retain its value. And why? Because it's backed by gold and not by any government promise. There are two main de-dollarization camps, right? One side believes that dethroning the US dollar is very easy and all it takes is bilateral trade. Countries, they just need to trade using their own local currencies, right? And the other side believes that the king dollar can never be dethroned, that talks of a BRICS currency is flawed, and there's no escaping the world reserve currency. The US dollar will always be on top. And I want to be clear that the dollarization will continue with or without a new BRICS currency. It's just a matter of time. But trying to replace the dollar as the primary currency, as the number one currency, is not an easy task. It's nearly impossible unless you have a clear advantage. And this advantage is something that gold brings to the table. So here's the truth, right? Unless gold comes into the equation, no currency on earth can overtake the US dollar because it has an insanely wide lead, not the euro or the Chinese yuan, and we need to understand why. Now remember that de-dollarization does not mean dethroning the dollar. In order to dethrone the dollar, you need to replace what the dollar system provides the world, which is access to the deepest capital markets in the world. So let me explain. The capital markets are where you can invest and trade your money in, right? When you are buying stocks, bonds, or commodities, you are accessing the capital markets using your money. And what the US dollar offers the world is a very deep marketplace that attracts a ton of investors. There are many places for you to invest your dollars compared to other markets globally. For example, the US equity markets are the largest in the world, worth over $51 trillion. It is over 4 times bigger than the next biggest market, which is China. In fact, it represents 46% of the world's equity market cap, and that's how deep the American stock market is. And the US bond market is just as gigantic at around $46 trillion. It is bigger than the next three bond markets combined, which belongs to China, Japan, and the UK. So what does this do? It attracts investors to use the reserve currency because the dollar has meaning to it. You can use it to buy a ton of stuff. You can buy oil, gold, stocks, and bonds. And understand why this is so important. When Saudi Arabia sells their oil for US dollars, they obviously have to invest the cash somewhere. You can't have it sitting in a vault when inflation is just so high. So they invest into the US capital markets by usually buying treasury bonds, and they aren't selling the majority of their oil yet in other currencies because the markets there aren't as deep. And that's why many experts believe that the king dollar will never die, because they have set up a system where the dollar is the most useful coupon in the world. The US has the biggest funfair with the most stalls, and they only accept dollars. And remember, it took time for America to develop such a system. It took them 80 years after the Bretton Woods Agreement and decades after Nixon sealed the petrodollar arrangement to reach this point. It was not an overnight affair. And this is why we are seeing de-dollarization taking ages to proceed. Yes, the dollar's losing market share versus other currencies. Yes, dropped from 70% to under 59% in just 20 years. And this gradual slide down will continue year after year, especially after the sanctions in 2022. And this is why the BRICS nations, they are discussing backing up their currency with gold. The fire of the dollarization is already set, but gold, it is the fuel that will accelerate the process. So why does BRICS need a gold-backed currency? Why can't they just back it with another basket of currencies like the rupee or the yuan? And the answer is simple. because like the dollar, they are all fiat currencies. And fiat currencies, they all share one similar property and they all lose value over time. Gold is different. It has stored value for thousands of years and have outlasted any civilization and monetary system. So there's been a legacy of trust when it comes to gold. Every culture and country today identifies true money with gold. And I want us to see the biggest problem with the dollar, which is the loss of purchasing power. Now, a lot of us already know this, but if we really quantify how big the problem is, you're in for a shock. According to the BLS, just between 2021 and 2022, the dollar has lost 7.4% in purchasing power. And that is an insane amount of value that has been printed away by the Federal Reserve. That is a crazy rate of inflation. And this isn't just affecting domestic Americans, it affects holders of US dollars all over the world. And if BRICS introduces a gold backing, it will stabilize the value of their currency. The new currency will preserve its purchasing power much better than the dollar, which is purely fiat. And we can see how badly the purchasing power of the dollar has eroded since the Fed was established in 1913. If you started with just $1, you will need over $30 today to have the same purchasing power. But here's the interesting thing. The US dollar was on a gold standard until 1971. And you can see its value staying relatively stable until Nixon removed the gold peg from the dollar. And this is not a conspiracy. The data shows us the truth. And understand that this is what the BRICS nations are trying to accomplish. This is what I mean by attacking the dollar's biggest weakness. Now, the second weakness of the dollar is the threat of sanctions, and this is the most straightforward to understand. If you're a foreign holder of dollar assets and the US doesn't like what you are doing, your holdings could get frozen. It has been done multiple times in history that includes Russia and Iran, and that's why we are seeing countries like China de-dollarize by dumping their US bonds to an all-time low. They know the hidden threat when it comes to holding US treasuries or any other dollar assets, right? It can be taken away from you. We have think tanks in America already wargaming the idea of Western sanctions, freezing away China's foreign reserves. So this is not some fairy tale scenario, it could come true. And this is why gold is just so important. It is a neutral asset that is free from sanctions and any currency system. And you can be sure that if BRICS nations, they issue a gold-backed currency, they won't make the same mistake of weaponizing it. So how would a BRICS currency work? Is it even feasible for the BRICS nations to replicate a kind of gold standard? And the answer is yes, it can be done. Gold can be used to back up a new currency to challenge the dollar. And this is where we need to dive deeper into the mechanics, because once you understand this, you'll realize that this could become a reality very soon. And to back up a currency with gold, you obviously need gold and lots of it. In a previous video, we talked about why the United States can't return to a gold standard, because if they do, they will have to revalue all hard assets, which will destroy the American economy. It could cause instant hyperinflation, and the reason is simple. The Fed has printed up too many dollars and the system is literally drowning in all that excess money. So if they want to back up all those dollars with gold, they will have to devalue the dollar against gold. And if we take the US dollar monetary base, which is $5.3 trillion, and we divide it by 260 million ounces of gold in the treasury, we get a gold price of over $20,000, and that is insane. Plus, if the United States goes out to the open market to buy gold, it will destroy any trust left in the dollar system. The US is trapped. So the safest way for BRICS to proceed is to create a separate currency backed by gold. It won't be the yuan, the rupee, or the ruble that's backed by gold. It will likely be a totally separate unit. And this is how it can work. The BRICS nations can consolidate all their gold together, allowing for an independent audit of their holdings. This means Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa can consolidate all their gold together with the claims managed by the BRICS Bank. And this doesn't mean they will transport all the gold to the bank located in Shanghai, but the bank will manage the accounting and issuing of the gold-backed currency. So the more gold the BRICS nations contribute to the stockpile, the more gold-backed currency they can issue. And if member countries don't have enough gold, no problem. They can always expand to include oil, silver, and other commodities. But let's just stick to gold for now. Now here comes the tricky part. Should the BRICS nations have a 100% reserve ratio for the gold backing? That means holding enough gold to account for every single currency unit. So if countries decide to redeem the currency for gold, BRICS can honor every single redemption request if tested. Countries or companies that hold the currency can head to the BRICS bank to cash in for physical gold bars, but in practice it will likely be less than 100%. And that is what we call a partial backing. During the gold standard in 1913, the Federal Reserve was required to hold gold equal to 40% of the dollars issued. In reality, though, the reserve ratio went as low as 10%. There was never really a full gold backing. But here's the interesting thing, because the BRICS currency now has a stable value thanks to gold, all other currencies in the world will be pegged to this new gold standard. So why can this break the dollar? Because now there's a currency that can retain its value. When gold rises, it's not really because it is worth more, but because the dollar, the fiat currency, is becoming less. It is worth less. Every time the world faces an inflation crisis, it doesn't matter if it's money printing like in '08 or 2020 or supply shock like today, gold goes up. Because it is accounting for the loss of purchasing power thanks to inflation, people start to bid the price up. So when BRICS issues their gold-backed currency, it creates a powerful incentive for the world to leave the dollar regime and try the BRICS ecosystem. And within BRICS itself, a gold-backed currency will be that fire to spark further de-dollarization in the bloc. For example, China and Brazil recently reached a deal to ditch the dollar and trade in their respective currencies. And this makes sense because Brazil can take the yuan they earn from their exports and then import other stuff from China. China, on the other hand, can use their Brazilian real earnings to import commodities like oil or wheat from Brazil down the road. But problems arise when it comes to holding each other's currency for long periods of time. We can see over the last 5 years alone, the real has dropped by 24% versus the yuan. So if you're China, you can't really sit on your real reserves. You need to invest in either Brazilian bonds or their stock market. Then you have to pray that when you redeem your money, you don't lose out on the exchange rate. But with a gold-backed currency, that isn't a problem anymore. You can trade as much as you want. You can rack up a lot of trade surplus and just sit on the currency because you know it is as good as gold. And this extends to the rest of the world. According to BNP Paribas, that is why gold is essential. A currency backed by gold effectively turns it into an investable asset that foreign central banks can hold. So if I'm Saudi Arabia, I can sell oil for this new currency without worrying about losing value. I can just sit on it and it will retain value over a long period of time. And this is the whole point of central bank reserves. Now, here's the game changer. If the BRICS nations can make this new currency redeemable for other commodities like oil, wheat, and base metals, then suddenly you have a type of commodity currency that is much more useful. You can now buy commodities straight from the BRICS nations without using the dollar, and they still need to go a step further. They still have to make the new currency exchangeable for the local currencies of the BRICS members. And I'll tell you why. You have to make the currency as useful as possible by allowing the common currency to be exchanged for the Chinese yuan or the Indian rupee. Investors can now access the capital markets of those countries. They can start to buy bonds and stocks in the BRICS nations as well. And this will help to build up the capital markets of the BRICS nations. Their stock markets and the commodity exchanges will just explode up. But here's the final nail in the coffin. If the BRICS nations can build a bond market directly around the gold-backed currency, this will be a real pain for the dollar. Just imagine a bond market that pays interest on a currency backed by gold. It is essentially multiplying your gold holdings. You actually gain in purchasing power. It's not just keeping pace with inflation. You actually start to accumulate real wealth. Before 1971, when the dollar was pegged to gold, banks were paying interest rates on deposits. Back in the 1950s and 60s, Fed funds actually paid up to 10% interest rates when the dollar was still backed by gold. In fact, the average yield on the 10-year treasury during the gold standard was around 3, 4, even 5%. So if you had US bonds back then, you actually were earning a real return. And this is why establishing a gold-backed currency is such a threat to the dollar. BRICS is trying to replicate the sequence of steps that help the dollar become the world reserve currency. And if the BRICS currency succeeds, we could see two financial markets evolve: the dollar system versus the gold-backed money. One will be based mostly on imaginary financial wealth. It will revolve around highly leveraged paper instruments, and the other will be based on real hard assets like gold. It will center around economies that manufacture goods and produce commodities. And the real kicker will be if Saudi Arabia joins BRICS, because if they do, suddenly the BRICS plus currency will become even more useful. Countries can now bypass the dollar to buy oil without worrying about a loss of purchasing power. So I hope you can see the scenario of how the BRICS nations can win against the dollar. It won't be easy. It will still take years or even decades. They still need the power of gold. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Will BRICS succeed with a gold-backed currency? Will this flip the financial order? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe. Be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.